Americans really do care about their military. They care about military families. There are millions of us, literally, who want to connect in and make a difference. But the question is, how? That's really what Blue Star Families is about, is helping people to know that in their own towns, in their own neighborhoods, there are military families living there and experiencing the real serious stressors of this lifestyle. We need to look to our neighbors to make a difference. We need to find better ways to help people work together.
For me personally, I know once I got out of the military and my husband was still active duty, I found a job right away, so that was excellent. And then we moved, and I was pregnant, and I thought, great, who's gonna hire me? Pregnant now, baby on the way, and then I had our son and childcare. Where am I gonna find childcare? How can I afford the childcare?
Military families often feel like they don't have a sense of belonging. And I think part of that is because they're relocate so frequently, but part of it is also that the community sees them as temporary.
Our team at Blue Star Families has identified some of the top issues that are facing our military families in our annual Military Family Lifestyle Survey, where we listen to the stories of our military family members so that we can build and foster a greater sense of civilian military understanding among leaders and key decision makers who have the power to make the lives of those who serve and their families better for years to come. Of course, anyone can download this information from our website. You can use the data to make better and more informed decisions to empower the military families in your community. And I can tell you that the key to success in bettering the lives of our military families is bringing the community of supporters together, because together we are stronger.
The survey is at the heart of what we do because the facts matter. In 2009, when we started, we did our first survey, and it was eye-opening to folks, because it was telling people what folks were experiencing on the ground.
Over the last decade, we have worked tirelessly with local community leaders across America to make sure that Blue Star family members know that they are welcomed in their communities. But certainly, there's more that can be done.
When we asked military families to rank their top 5 issues of concern, their number 1 issue was time away from family, and that comes from deployments, training. This has its toll. Military spouse employment, the unemployment and underemployment can cripple military families.
Blue Star Families brought the military spouse unemployment issue to the forefront. We have contributed over $55 million in income to military spouses since 2017 alone, while connecting 3,500 military spouses to the training that prepares them for jobs of the future.
As families move around, finding the right school for their child, often in a remote location, can make you worry if you are doing the best you can for your child.
We need to make it easier for military kids to move from school to school. They're going to keep moving. We need to help them catch up if they're behind, or make sure that they're in the types of classes that they need to be in, because the kid didn't change. The school changed, and that's not the kid's fault.
My son was young. I think he went to probably at least 4 or 5 different schools before 5th grade. Academically, his grades were declining, and the school districts that we were in, they didn't pay attention to that.
Blue Star Families acts as a liaison to leaders in the education community. Our partners made it possible to conduct comprehensive outreach in order to provide government influencers, military families, and thousands of civilians this critical information.
The 4th top issue of concern for military families is family stability and quality of life. The 5th top area of concern is lack of control over the military career. We're pleased that military leadership is starting to recognize that families need and want more control over the path of their careers. This survey cries out the truth that we have a lot of changes we need to make. Together, we can build and empower a strong and collaborative community. Together, we can thrive. So join us in creating the future that military families deserve. Visit bluestarfam.org/survey to learn more and get involved.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our event MC, Brianna Keeler, anchor of CNN Right Now, military spouse, and Blue Star ambassador.
Bye. Here we go. Okay. You think I would know how to work a microphone, right? Considering what I do for a living. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm Brianna Keeler from CNN, and 4 years ago I started dating an Army Special Forces officer who'd had 5 combat deployments and told me that he probably wouldn't have any more. Yeah. I didn't know. Really, I didn't. So we got married, and he promptly deployed within our first year of marriage, and we have had the pleasure of celebrating one of our 3 wedding anniversaries together. So when I look back, one of the toughest times that I have had as a military spouse was a week before I launched my show on CNN, which that was a very exciting thing for me to do. That was a big development in my career. I really needed a lot of support while doing that. And he informed me about a week before that he would be unexpectedly traveling, starting a few days before I would launch the show. So at this point in time, I have a 5-month-old who's up 3 times a night, which is more than average, I found out, but it was pretty rough. And luckily, I had a 2.5-year-old who slept like a dream. And I had some help from friends, but I was throwing some money at the problem as well, and it really wasn't enough. This was just something I had to plug through, and when I look back on it, I honestly hardly remember any of this time period. It's just a wash. And over the next couple months, as I was dealing with the work pressure of trying to make sure that my new show was as good as it could be, and trying to deal with travel in and out of my service member husband, I had this feeling like my problems were kind of invisible to a lot of the people around me. And I realized that I was experiencing what so many military spouses experience. And this was just part of it, right? A lot of people don't see those particularly challenging times that you go through. They don't experience it as you do, which makes sense because the vast majority of Americans don't have a connection to an active duty or a deployable military family. So it was a few months after this, I had a breakfast meeting with Kathy, and she talked to me about being a Blue Star Families ambassador, and we also discussed an idea that I had for writing a column about military family issues and trying to bridge the civilian-military divide that I was personally feeling in my life as well. And that is part of the reason why Blue Star Families has been so near and dear to my heart, because I got that column off the ground a year ago. We announced it actually at this event a year ago. And you can check it out at cnn.com/homefront. And you can email me any idea that you have at homefront@cnn.com. That's homefront@cnn.com, and I will see your email. This has been so important for me. It's given me a huge sense of purpose and just sort of being able to reach out to the military community that I am such a new part of myself. And so one of the reasons, or many of the reasons, that I adore Blue Star Families is because of all the various things that they do. First, there's the community where I have been able to find military spouses like myself. And, you know, when I have an issue that I'm coming up against, I talk to them and say, is this normal? And they say, yeah, that's totally normal. And even that sometimes just gets me by, oh, okay, this is just sort of, oh, this is part of the experience. And my civilian friends don't understand that. It's certainly not normal to them, some of the challenges that I'm dealing with. And also Blue Star Families does so much on jobs with Spouse Force and connecting spouses to jobs in their community, which is huge for one of the big issues that we're going to be talking about today, which is binding military families with their civilian communities. And then just for me as a journalist, I love the data. This survey helps me all year round when I'm writing about military family experiences, because this helps me put cold, hard facts and numbers to those experiences that we are seeing, so we can understand that this family may be reporting something, but this is completely formulaic, and there's a policy approach to dealing with this. So I love Blue Star Families. It has made me a better journalist, and it has made me a better citizen, and it has made me a better member of a military family. So with that, it is now my honor to introduce Lieutenant General Dana Chipman, the Director of Education for the Federal Judicial Center and Chair of Services to the Armed Forces for the American Red Cross. In his role at the Federal Judicial Center, he leads a team that develops and conducts educational programming initiatives for federal judges and court employees. Retiring as a lieutenant general in the U.S. Army, Dana had an illustrious 33-year career, which included a 4-year term as the Judge Advocate General. Dana also serves with the U.S. House of Representatives as chief counsel to the Select Committee on the events surrounding the 2012 terrorist attack on Benghazi, Libya. Dana is a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point and Stanford Law. There's so much more. I only have a little more, just a little more. No, you hold a Master of Laws degree from the Judge Advocate General School and the Master of Naval Security Studies degree from the U.S. Army War College. Please join me now in welcoming him to the stage. I do what Kathy tells me to do. She told me to read that.
Well, good morning, all. It's an honor to be here. I'm always influenced by my favorite philosopher, Calvin. How many of you know Calvin and Hobbes? Good. This is a more mature, seasoned crowd, like me. Calvin and Hobbes is my favorite philosopher because he's got a really great insight into life. So here's my panel that has been motivating me lately. Calvin looks at his friend Hobbes the tiger and says, "You know what I pray for?" What? The strength to change what I can, the inability to accept what I can't, and the incapacity to tell the difference. And Hobbes said, "You should lead a very interesting life." And Calvin says, "Oh, I already do." So I think about that because I think about the energy of people like Kathy Ross Duque and so many gathered in this room who saw a need and decided, we have to make change. We have to change things, and we're going to take on some tough issues, some of which we can succeed in changing the culture or the understanding of the unique challenges faced by our military families. Others, we may not move the needle as much as we'd like, and yet you can start that seed of effort, and others will pick up the cause and keep it going. And so that's what I think all of you who are gathered here in this body are about today. I spent 33 years in the Army. Like many of you, I deployed. I spent 10 years in the special operations community, and so I would go, and I'm kind of old, so this was before cell phones and smartphones, and we'd leave, and my wife would get a call from my administrative assistant. She'd say, "Dana got to where he needs to go," and that's all she'd know. And she wouldn't know where I was, how long I was gone, or if I'd come home to go to basketball practice. She just didn't know any of that stuff. So that happened over the course of about 10 years, and I think about the issues that all of you have faced over time. We had to move middle schoolers and grade schoolers. We had to move it into Carlisle, where the townies always had preferential treatment on the sports teams, and the military dependents who came in for a year or so were sort of disfavored. So we had to figure out, what foreign language scheme are we subject to now in this state? What math can we take and still be on that college prep track that our kids were geared toward? And how can we, in fact, ensure that we retain the talent we know we have to have when we have such frustrating opportunities for our spouses in seeking and in securing employment? During my time as the Judge Advocate General, a group of JAG spouses formed this military spouse JD network, recognizing that bar licensing from state to state is a real problem. And so that effort continues apace as well. And so I look at what is involved in this effort, and I'm grateful for all of you willing to devote your passion and energy. My position now for this event is I'm with the Service to the Armed Forces Advisory Council with the American Red Cross, representing Kobe Langley here this morning. And the Red Cross and Blue Star families are engaged in similar efforts. They see service that is needed, and they try to figure out, where can we meet that need? For the Red Cross, it consists of communications services in emergencies and disaster relief for what appear to be an increasing number of natural disasters around the world. It's international humanitarian relief to those who are affected, who are victims of war, civilian non-combatants. It's blood products and volunteers in providing hospital and clinician services throughout the world. And so that's the Red Cross need, and it complements what those of you who are with Blue Star Families does as well, in seeing a need, whether it's education, in employment or in any other aspect of what the unique challenges of being a military service member. So that's what we're engaged in today. In my current role, I'm trying to bridge the military-civil divide. In part, I run education programs for judges. So this week we've got 46 new U.S. district judges and 17 new Court of Appeals judges gathered together at the building next to Union Station, the Thurgood Marshall Center. And we're trying to instill the rule of law and advance that and teach them a little bit about what it is to perform that role. And I actually, where I go, I talk about my military background and help, because many of these people just don't have any connection with a family member who has served. And so I thank all of you who are engaged in this morning. And now what I'd like to do is turn over to the main event. It's my great pleasure to introduce Kathy Roth-Duque, founder and chief executive officer of Blue Star Families. Kathy is the recipient of several awards for her service and leadership. What? Oh, come on up. For her service and leadership, including the Secretary of Defense's Medal for Outstanding Public Service, for her work at the Pentagon, President George H.W. Bush's Daily Point of Light Award, and most recently, the Chief of Staff of the Army's Outstanding Civilian Service Award. Please join me in welcoming Kathy to the stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dana. And thank you from our entire team at Blue Star Families to the team at the Red Cross for your continued support of Blue Star Families. Hosting us here in this room for the second time in the row. Red Cross is such an important partner to us. We do our best to knit ourselves as closely as possible to really talented, strong, smart, great partners, and many of you in this room reflect that. We have been successful because we're really good at asking for help. We asked Brianna for help, and she has given it in spades, and she is really sincere when she says get in touch with her. She has become on the pointy end of the spear for helping civilians understand the military family community, and she has helped so many organizations in addition to ours. So thank you, Brianna, for all you do for the community. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to Stronger Communities for a Stronger America, #BSF Survey. This gathering brings together leaders in many fields for all of us to use these results. Many of you here have contributed to understanding what questions we should ask. You've given us input on questions. You've helped us field the survey. Its results belong to all of you. We know that we will use it in our program, but we also understand that the military services and the nonprofits and the foundations in this room will be using it as well. The Blue Star Family Survey and this event wouldn't be possible without our partners at USAA. They have been our lead partner for many years, and we are so grateful for their leadership and their belief in the power of data to fuel good programming and good decisions. We know real change comes from showcasing the voices of those who serve. And since this survey's inception, we've seen enormous gains in policy, public and private partnerships, programming. As we move to this new decade, we're excited to continue to bring this survey out, to bring families closer to the communities in which they live. We're thrilled to have forged long-lasting partnerships, and I'd like to just shout out a couple of those here today. In addition to USAA, our sponsors for this survey are Lockheed Martin Corporation, Craig Newmark Philanthropies, CSX Corporation, Hunt Companies, OptumServes, AARP, BAE Systems, Booz Allen Hamilton, Northrop Grumman Corporation, Walmart, Army and Air Force Exchange Services, Comcast, NBC Universal, and the Boeing Company. I also want to recognize American Red Cross for hosting this event for us today, so if you can all help me in thanking our sponsors. And we're thrilled to have our media partners, military.com, Task and Purpose, and The Hill, which will help us spread this information. Your support allows us to do this work. Thank you for joining us in person or on live stream. Your choice to spend your precious time with us is very meaningful. We're grateful for your commitment and your support. As you participate in today's event, please hashtag BSF Survey on social media. Please share your photos and quotes so we can maximize this work we do. And please allow me to thank the leaders in government and military that are here with us today. Your time is very, very important, and the fact that you are with us today means all the difference in the world. Vice Admiral John Nowell Jr., Major General Tammy Smith, Rear Admiral Carl Lady, Brigadier General Lorna Malock, Brigadier General Roy Mccaffrey, Brigadier General Sean Campbell, Deputy Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard Rob Bushy, Marie Balaki, Director of Marine and Family Programs Division, and also our senior spouses who are joining us today. And their leadership is very important to us and means so much. Mrs. Holly Ann Milley, who will be joining us after she finishes with her husband on Capitol Hill this morning. Mrs. Alexandra Grinston, Mrs. Donna Berger, Mrs. Stacy Black, Mrs. Don Schultz, and Mrs. Amy Vanderhayden. Now I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Mike Haney, Vice Chancellor for Strategic Initiatives and Innovation at Syracuse University, and the founder and executive director of the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse University. For the 5th year in a row, Mike and his extraordinary team of researchers have worked tirelessly alongside our researchers to help us design and analyze the survey and write the survey report. We are so proud to be associated with such a stellar research institution. We couldn't do it without you. We want to do it for many years to come. Through our unique collaboration, we are poised to tell the story not just of the military community, but also the veteran community. Would you please join me and say a few words?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here among so many friends. I want to thank everyone for coming out today and allowing me to take just a brief moment to speak to the importance of this event. We're here today in part to celebrate the release of another year of critical insights into the state of our military families, as informed by the Blue Star Family's annual military lifestyle survey. The survey has become an institution in and of itself, integral to how we serve and understand our military families. I'd like to first congratulate Kathy and the Blue Star Families team for the passion and the persistence that it takes year after year to get this work done. The IVMF has been a privilege to be a partner in this effort since 2014, something we're very proud of. I'd also like to extend my thanks and congratulations to all those who contributed to this effort, the Blue Star Families research team, as well as Rosie Morey and Rachel Linzer, I think I'd be able to spit that out, from my own team. And importantly, I also want to, as Kathy did, acknowledge the presenting sponsor, USAA, a great partner of ours as well, also CSX and Northrop Grumman and all of the sponsors who make this happen. I also want to thank the American Red Cross, General Chipman. I thought for a long time I was the only one that looked to Calvin and Hobbes to define their own personal life philosophy, and now I know I have a kindred spirit sitting right next to me at the table. Finally, I'd like to just take one brief minute to offer my own perspective on what this event and this survey truly represents. First, in a very practical sense, the agenda for today reflects the enormous growth and impact that the survey report release has experienced since its inception in 2009. So again, congratulations and well done to the Blue Star Families team. But even more than that, it's an opportunity to demonstrate the important reasons that practitioners and policymakers and the American public must engage and understand the challenges and the successes of our military families. And I'll highlight just one of those reasons this morning, specifically as it relates to our national defense. When I started doing this work now more than a decade ago, there was a lot of discussion and speculation, but not much research-informed evidence as to the relationship between action or inaction to address the concerns of military families and the DoD's ability to recruit and retain the nation's most skilled, qualified, and service-minded individuals to military service. Today, however, a much enhanced ability to leverage robust and longitudinal data informative of the lived experiences of our nation's military families supports more than ever before a more comprehensive understanding of the social, the economic, and the wellness concerns of that those families have shouldered since our post 9/11 wars have commenced. What does this body of research, including findings from the Blue Star Family Survey, demonstrate regarding the relationship between military families and the future viability of the all-volunteer military? Very simply, it's that the in-service and post-service welfare of our military families correlates directly to the all-volunteer force imperative of recruiting high-quality, socioeconomically representative force, period, end of sentence. In other words, the health of our military families is inextricably linked to the future viability of the all-volunteer military, period. Again, this is not speculation, it's not conjecture, but it is now research-informed fact. As an advocate for this community, but also as an academic, it's clear to me that investments positioned to care for and support our military families, to include a robust infrastructure supporting the transition of military families to civilian life, represents a critical investment in the nation's future defense. So what does all that mean in a practical sense? It means acknowledging in our public policy and in our public discourse that we put our security at risk when we do not adequately care for, support, and empower military families. It means that both the public and private sector must join together to take action to make strengthening our military families a national priority. It means that building a prosperous and safe nation for future generations requires that we treat our military families like a treasured national resource. And while it should go without saying, it also means that investments positioned to support our military families are morally and ethically the right thing to do. These are very complex issues, but exceedingly important. I am proud of the work that we're doing alongside Blue Star families to advance this agenda. So thanks again to the Blue Star families team for our partnership, and congratulations to you, Kathy, and the team for another great year of action and impact. Thanks so much.
Modern military families are young and they are diverse. 20% are female, serving an average of 8 to 11 years. After the first tour of duty, almost 80% are married, and most have children. That's a departure from the standing armies of history. As the military continues to evolve, so do today's military family support needs. That's why the Military Family Lifestyle Survey is so important. It's vital that we continue to understand the changing needs of our military families and work together to address them. Mike just spoke so clearly to why this is so imperative. So to start off today's panel discussions, I would like to welcome our first panel to the stage to discuss strengthening military families, reactions to the 2019 #BSF survey results. So please join me in welcoming our panel participants, Hisako Sonathavile, Director of Applied Research for Blue Star Families, and Rosalinda Mori, Director of Applied Research and Analytics for IVMF, joined by our panel moderator, Dr. Caitlin Thompson, who is Vice President of Community Partnerships for Cohen Veterans Network.
Hello? Oh.
Good morning. There we go. I'm Caitlin Thompson. I'm so delighted to be here today. Blue Star Families is such an important partner for Cohen Veterans Network. We are, just very briefly, a network of mental health clinics throughout the country. We have 14 clinics now. We'll have 25 in the next couple of years. And one of the things that we do that I'm the most proud of, or at least one of the most proud of, is that we serve military families. We don't just serve, we serve veterans families, but we also serve military families and family members. And it's because of these events, because of the surveys like this, that help to inform how we best can serve our clients, and I know that so many of you are from organizations where you need to also be informed of this important work. So delighted to be here. I'm told that you are to please read the bios in your packets, and please do, because these are a couple of extraordinary women that I'm really delighted to speak with today. So let's get into it. So we want to talk about the fact that this is not the only survey that looks at military families, and we just wondered, why should we care about this particular survey? What are the specific special things about this survey? And Asako, we'll start with you.
Thanks. So I was joking with Rosie a little earlier that I think Dr. Haney took all my talking points, which were excellent. You said them probably far better than I would, so I'm going to kind of gloss over those in a minute, but more so speak from a personal perspective a little bit. As a spouse of an active duty service member, we were married back in 2009, and I knew nothing about the military, and then kind of forced into a deployment and not really understanding where resources and other people also experience these things I don't know. And I think since then it's just extraordinary that there's so many different surveys out there now, so much attention being given to data and really understanding military family life issues and conversations that are happening as a result of that. That now I feel as a military spouse in particular, very validated by a lot of the work that particularly Blue Star Families' survey is able to do, that these experiences are not just my own, but there's others out there. And I know that through events like this in collaboration, we had 42, I believe, survey outreach partners, numerous sponsors, as you heard, really dedicated to ensuring that research such as ours is really done in a collaborative spirit, and also in a way that we're able to advance the conversation to really make some change for military families. And change takes time, so we don't always necessarily see those things right away, but it's reassuring to me as a military family member that research such as this is happening. There are people that are really committed. So just, I guess, to my one bullet point that I'll re-emphasize from Dr. Haney's points, I think that our survey started in 2009 really to provide that extra data and that need to be data informed in order to provide more services and support and resources for military families. And while our survey certainly does still look at those issues and how we can help the Department of Defense and others in military leadership advance military family outcomes, Blue Star Families as an organization, but also as a focus, also understands that there is a critical component in making sure that your civilians have an understanding around how do we make life better for military families. We have to do this together, and that our research really speaks and looks at an angle of civilians' collective understanding of military and veteran issues is the foundation for sustainable military and veteran policies and program development. And if that we're not working together towards these things and understanding how military families are building belonging in their communities, local civilian communities particularly, we're not able to really advance the needle. And so I think that what's in particular one of the things that makes our survey special.
How do I follow up with that? No, I guess I'll bring it from a methodology standpoint. The unique thing about this survey is that it is comprehensive. It does talk about various topics. It talks about mental health, financial readiness, employment, transition, childcare, veteran employment, military spouse employment, and the topics are endless. And you don't find many surveys that really go into every one of these. So we can not only talk about experiences in a singular, perspective, but really talk about experiences across a variety of different components. No other survey, I think, has ever come close to really talking about the comprehensiveness. Another, I think, unique aspect of this survey is that it does go on the continuum of service. So not only do we look at the active duty family and the challenges associated with that, we also look at the transitioning service member and the veterans as well. And again, you don't find many surveys out there that focus on all spectrums across, military and post-military life as well, which is extremely important if we want to expand our knowledge of the implications and the impacts of service and post, on post-service life. And then lastly, back to methodology, even since our partnership, like this year alone, we had over 11,000 respondents. That's not small. And that actually exceeds some of the federal data out there. Since our partnership, we've had over 50,000 respondents, responding to the survey. That's a lot of data for data-informed decision. I think those are impressive numbers.
Yeah, if I could just add to that too, I think we were, as I was mentioning a little earlier, about the need for military family-specific research, and you make a good point about the comprehensiveness of our survey, but also the fact that we're looking at it from, again, that military family lens. And there's value, very much value, in looking at topics subtopically and also by subpopulation. But to be able to look at military family issues comprehensively really gives you that whole family picture, and then also that holistic understanding that a lot of these issues are intertwined. You're not able to really just address one of these things and hope that, like, oh, okay, military spouse unemployment, I'm just going to give you a job and you'll be okay. But because we have such rich data, because we ask a lot of comprehensive information, if you've ever taken our survey because you're military connected, it can take somebody roughly 30 minutes just to get through the survey, and that's because, it's not an easy feat, and we understand that it takes a lot of time. And so that in itself is just impressive that we are able to always get the respondent pool that we do. But we need that rich data to then be able to look at relationships across the board. We need to be able to say, okay, spouse unemployment, let's look at that as the presence of children. How does that differ? Okay, let's look at that from like military other issues as it relates to relocation, deployments, so on and so forth. Service member day-to-day job demands, like all of these things come into play.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll add on to add on to this discussion is the ability to compare, I want to say, between different groups, which again, you won't be able to do with any other survey unless you have the sample and the data in there. So for example, when we talk about employment, we're looking at veteran employment, we're looking at military spouse employment. And in this survey, we found that although veterans had indicated that employers in their communities had this eagerness to hire, military spouse didn't find that same eagerness. That's actually an interesting, different perspective that I think needs to be highlighted in particular. And again, if it wasn't for this survey expanding to the different populations, we wouldn't be able to find those insights.
Great, thank you. I'm really struck by the relationship between Blue Star Families and IVMF and how that's evolved over time. And it's just such an incredible opportunity to get the kind of a longitudinal look of how military families and the concerns that come up for them have been shaped over the last 5 or so years through the survey. And I'm wondering, Hisalka, maybe you can answer this, but any surprises that came out for this particular survey?
Yeah, sure. So, each year, I think, with any organization that's looking at survey methodology and so forth, you want to be able to build off of the previous year. And that's one of the beauties of being able to have our survey year after year, is we're able to build upon some of these findings. And so while, top issues of concern may not necessarily look much different from years past, what we're able to then do is take a look at, let me peel back that onion just a little bit more and really look at the why and the what as it relates to some of these concerns. So for example, military children's education remains a top concern for military families. And that's not any different, and so therefore not quite a surprise. Time away from family, spouse employment, these are all things that we typically still see. But what is surprising is, again, the why and the what's. And so what we understood for military children's education is that military families were respondents were saying that they were homeschooling at higher rates than their civilian counterparts. When we really look at why are you homeschooling your families, for the most part, civilians are looking to homeschool so that they can exercise their personal and their religious beliefs, so their personal choices, if you will. But when we asked our military families, why are you homeschooling, the top 3 most cited reasons were flexibility to spend time with my family and the service member, children stability for their academics, and then poor children education. So those were the 3. So not so much your religious beliefs and not so much your personal practices. Also, spouse employment again. We, as I mentioned a little earlier, we understand that spouse unemployment is an issue and it's not new. We see that year after year. But what is really the top barrier? We know service member job demands are kind of a top 3 cited reason, but what about the job demands, the deployments, the relocation? This year we unraveled that it is the day-to-day job demands, and that unpredictability maybe, and this flexibility needed for the scheduling to be able to maintain a career is what was surprising. And so I think, when we really also take a look at mental health pieces too, one of ours, we look at a component around military mental health as it relates to the whole family, particularly this year. And I think there's shifts that are occurring right now where suicide is being spoken about in a military family context. Again, we are very excited about that shift. But when we asked our respondents, of those that had suicidal ideations in the past year or suicidal attempts in the last year, 48% of our active duty families, National Guard and Reserve families, had indicated that they did not seek treatment because they were afraid of the harm to their service member's career. And we understand, I think, as a community, there's stigma and that we need to combat around veteran suicide and service member suicide, but we don't always talk about the whole family and the families need to address suicide and suicidal ideations. And I think that was particularly surprising to me, was that, they don't want to, they also are concerned about this. Where's the messaging and the navigation that we need to do to be able to address some of those needs that we may not be thinking about as a community just yet? Anything else?
Great, thank you. So, Rosie, as I said, IVMF, there has been this collaboration. It's been for about 6 years or so. Can you talk about how have we, since over this time, how has the survey helped to move the needle for our service members, for their families, and for veterans as well?
Yeah, so it's moved the needle on many aspects. I'm going to focus on transition because I think we've really focused that since the beginning of our collaboration on that topic. And I think when we first started, there was limited data out there. What's the relationship between transition and outcome? And so, because it is an annual survey, because it's a living survey, we're able to build upon previous findings and add to it. So we learned that there is a relationship between the transition and the outcomes, employment, mental health, a number of the social, economic, and wellness outcomes of transitioning, or of service members as they transition out. But we also looked at the complexities, and again, the financial, the family unit, I think, is another aspect, looking at military spouses as a especially stable employment as a ease to facilitate transition, as that component. And I think that we've moved and learned a lot through the various years that we've conducted this survey, and we're doing it more to the family transition and not an individual transition, and evolving into a community transition and availability of resources in those transition, and not, again, what's available at military installations and such. And I think that both of our organizations have taken findings and applied it through our programs and services, through policy, through testimonies, so that we can continue to push those programs and policies.
I'm going to just add to that. So my, just again, a personal story, if you will. My husband is looking to retire very soon, next year or so. And he's going through this process right now and really trying to understand and navigate that transition. And granted, I don't really know what reality looks like way back when other folks were transitioning, but I am encouraged that his battalion command is very much like, transition is important. we know we need to start early. Like, if you need to do this, I am supportive, and I want to make sure that you're transitioning well, because we know that post-military life is going to occur, and we need to make sure that you're okay with, like, you're ready and you're able, and it's great that your spouse is employed. That's going to help you. But just some of these conversations, again, I don't know if the reality is that the conversations are also happening back in the day, but from our survey research, navigating transition was hard. It was go to the class and figure it out, maybe. And I think there's a lot more backing because of results like ours.
Fantastic. I'm looking for the person who has the... Oh, she's right there. I'm good? Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks. We're good with time. Okay, so can you tell me, what is one of the things, or what is the biggest takeaway? What is a huge takeaway for you? What do you personally want people to understand from this year's survey?
Sure. So I'll take that first. As I mentioned a little earlier, there's a lot of different things that can come from, depending on what your interests are maybe and so forth around takeaways. But I think my one call to action or takeaway is that change takes time. And so I think a lot of times people think, okay, great, Blue Star Families just published another survey. We're going to see a huge shift in landscape. And I am also very surprised that sometimes culture does move very quickly, and conversations are happening, I think, with the brand of the survey. A lot more people knowing about the survey, like some of those shifts do occur a lot faster than I realized. But a lot of these issues are going to be perennial, and they may not always look different, but they are conversations that are continuing to be having, and it's very much more important than ever for military families to continue to take the survey such as ours, because people are trying to make data-informed policy and programmatic changes, and if you're not contributing your voice, then you're going to be underrepresented. And we think, from our survey, because it's comprehensive in nature, and they were really being able to take in National Guard, Reserve, military families, veteran families, that they're doing our best to be able to get a whole bunch of different perspectives. But if you don't take the survey, then you're not going to be able to be added. And I think that in itself is a disservice to you. Our survey is only as good as the voices that you provide for us. So we hope that you continue to take our survey so that we can advocate best for you.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. My one takeaway is that, this isn't a survey just for one population or another. It's a survey for all military-affiliated individuals. So for active duty service members, for families, for veterans and their spouses, all those voices are important, and we highlight all of the findings within our report, and we'll continue to do so. So I think that is ultimately the biggest takeaway, is that there's something for everybody in this data, in this survey, in this report.
Great, thank you. We have about 5 minutes left, and I'm excited we get to have a little Q&A. So if anybody has any questions for this panel, please raise your hand. We're really going to be diving into a lot of the results over time, but over the next few hours. But just overall questions?
I think we did a good job.
Oh, yes. The question is whether it includes Gold Star families and post-military career.
Sure. So we do ask a demographic question that asks whether or not you're a widow or the service member or veteran has passed away. We can only do so much depending on the response size, sample size. And so if we have enough respondents, then we're able to cut some of that data. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't get that sample size, and it's hard for us to be able to do much or really highlight and elevate some of those issues. So every year we strive to see what else and who else we can represent, again, dependent on the sample size. So we do collect the information, and we are able to cross-analyze, but sample size-wise, I think we're kind of small there to be able to do much.
And then post-military career absolutely is a core issue and topic of ours, and we collect it on an annual basis. And I will say that what is reported is probably a quarter of the findings, to be honest. There's a lot in there, but there's a lot that we're not able to report. So the linkage, for example, on post-military career with MOS is something that we look at, and happy to discuss more if needed.
loud. I went to thank you very much for adding the reserve, because I was very vocal about that last year. So I see that, and I was one of those ones who responded. What I am now looking at the data is that because Blue Star is very active in this area and other parts of the country, are you collecting, and do you see potentially differences on parts of the country where the data may be skewed a little bit, where you're seeing potentially, I mean, this year we know that housing is an issue, issues with housing, but also medical issues? Are you seeing, because it's so visible around the DC area, is that something that you're tracking where people are responding from different parts of the country?
Sure, yes. So Blue Star Families, as you may or may not know, we are a chapter-oriented, membership-driven organization. So we do have about 11 chapters now, and it's a priority and importance to us to understand how military families are taking the larger survey and responding at their chapter location. So we will be sharing some chapter location-specific information depending on, again, the sample size and how we're able to cut that information. We're very much handicapped by the respondent numbers and being able to confidently be able to say that these are some trends and issues that we're seeing. So yes, but what we are able to see so far among those that have a large enough sample size is that there are differences, but there's also similarities. And so, we hope to be able to release some of that information more locally in the coming months. Sure, yeah. So I think in the past we've talked a lot about agency and the ability for military family service members, to have, and families, but to be able to have that voice and that say. Not everybody, I think the Department of Defense, from what I've read, understands and starts to realize now that not everybody is trying to make this a career, but they very much want to be able to provide public service. And it does make things a little bit concerning and stressful for people. So this particular option is a new option for 2019 under our top issues of concern, but it really evolved because of this understanding that, okay, we know from the information that people are looking for more control and more agency. Let me put that in there and try to see really if the data reflects that as well.
And the only thing I'll add to that is that this is an annual survey. It's a living survey. Priorities, issues, new insights come into play, and we have to adapt the survey to reflect that as well. And just like we're including the populations, the Guard, reservists, those are things that we need to be moving towards, and we strive to continue to do so.
And that was our last question.
Oh, wonderful.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for this work. Thanks.
Thank you so much to our first panel. It's so impactful to have all of this qualified data to use to encourage the military and to encourage government leadership to create change in support of military families. The rest of our panels today will cover some of these major issues that were highlighted by the 2019 Military Family Lifestyle Survey and the data that you just heard about. So to introduce our next panel, I'd like to welcome Mrs. Stacy Black. Stacy Black is the spouse of Sergeant Major Troy Black, the 19th Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps. Mrs. Black is a retired first sergeant who understands what it means to be an enlisted Marine and a military spouse. Sergeant Major and Mrs. Black both care deeply about the military and their families and know that there are challenges that come with military life. We're so fortunate to have her here with us today to introduce our next panel. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Stacy Black.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today. The Military Family Lifestyle Survey is so important because this is how military families are able to communicate their needs and concerns so that they may be addressed by senior military leaders, politicians, nonprofits, civilian corporations. I am nervous, sorry. I know firsthand what it's like to be a Marine and a military spouse. I know how important it is that we hear these families and make real changes that will impact their lives. So where do we go from here? How do we use this data and information to create and implement policies that address the reality of military families and military service? How can we further standardize policy requirements that impact military families to improve their quality of life? Our panel will dive into military reform initiatives and the efforts the service branches are taking to ensure the success of our nation's military families. Please welcome panel participants, Major General Tammy Smith, U.S. Army, Rear Admiral Carl Lady, U.S. Navy, and Brigadier General Select Sean Campbell, U.S. Air Force. This panel will be moderated by Kathy Roth Duque, CEO of Blue Star Families.
Thanks, everyone, and I really appreciate my panelists for being with us here today. At Blue Star Families, we like to see ourselves as a good family member to the service partners, the service leadership. We support you, but we want to tell the truth, too. We want to help you be better so that all of us can thrive, and we really appreciate the partnership that we've gotten from the military services, and I think the real openness to do a lot of difficult changes, because 21st century military is different than the 20th century military, and change is hard. So please read the bios in your packets. These are very impressive people. I also just want to highlight that Blue Star Families is in the process of negotiating MOUs with each of the military services so that we can help, the services can help us push the survey out and do some of our work locally. So I want to thank each of you for that work that you're doing with us. So the military has changed a lot. We don't tell you we're going to issue you a family or you shouldn't have one anymore. I'd love to hear some of your personal perspectives about the way the services have been evolving in terms of understanding and appreciating the roles of families.
I'll make sure this is working first. Yeah. It's good morning. It's so wonderful to be among so many friends this morning. The how it's changed, I think, one of the things that has changed in just where we are right now is that when General McConville and Secretary McCarthy came in, they immediately put in place people as a priority. And while we can never forget readiness, reform, modernization, and all those things are important, we do that, and the entire Army staff is doing that screen through a lens of people first. So we're asking those questions about, even as we move forward, about basing decisions, equipping decisions, how do we screen this? How does this affect our people? How does this affect our families? And in support of that, we have a quality of life task force. It's working along some very specific lines of effort: housing, healthcare, childcare, spouse employment, PCS moves, taking a hard look at that in the Army, support and resilience. And then I think that what's changed also is that recognition that we're seeing that families are changing, that family composition is different than what is, we'll say, I'll go like this, traditional. You know, people are forming family units in different ways. There are different caretakers. There are many different things going on. And I think that we're recognizing that and adapting our programs. And then just to the Blue Star families, I would just have to say that your recognition of changing families, when my family finally became visible in 2011 after the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, you were one of the first organizations that reached out to us. And we were always grateful for that.
That's lovely, thank you.
First of all, thank you to Blue Star Families for the informative military lifestyle survey. The facts and data that you present add to our body of work to help us make better informed decisions on policy and way to move forward with the family. So thank you again for that, for the information that you provide us to allow us to help to make those decisions. Navy families kind of have one thing in common, and that's a dedication and devotion to their service member. They, like the general said, there's a great diversity of families, and it's we see an increasing diversity as we continue. There used to be an old saying: we recruit a sailor and retain our family. In some cases, we're recruiting a family and retaining the family, and it's different as we move forward in the 21st century, especially with their enabled communications technology, and the other ways we reach out to families have changed. What we do know in the Navy is that Family readiness is a component of individual and unit readiness that is absolutely critical. As we pivot and get after great power competition, our great asymmetric advantage over our competitors is our sailors. Their ability, their knowledge, education, ability to make individual decisions is important, and that is backstopped by a strong family. We know that families provide our sailors purpose and meaning to serve. Having spent my years and years at sea, my wife's stories always start with, and he was at sea. I have 6 children, and there's lots of stories. But it's that, hey.
Made it home a few times.
Yeah. I'll leave that one. Our families also provide stability and resilience to our sailors to enable them to continue that time at work and that time away. Additionally, a stronger sailor means a stronger fleet. And it also, strong families mean we don't have to take that sailor off the ship and bring him home to solve a family problem. We can leave that unit out operational. So I grew up in the submarine force. And I can remember where a sailor had a family problem, we would have to surface and go in and get that sailor off the ship. There's always a little bit of risk when your attack submarine is bobbing up and down next to a small boat, and the sailor literally is jumping onto a boat so he can go somewhere to some foreign country he's never been to fly back home. And so every time we eliminate those challenges, we increase our operational readiness, and that's really a key to what our families provide. We are not perfect. Okay, we've got a long way to go. We've got childcare issues. We're getting after the housing issues and a number of other things, but we understand the changing natures of the families and the policies that we're rolling forward. Chief of Naval Operations 2 years put out the Navy Family Framework, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But that's kind of our strategy to get after some of these family problems. Thank you.
Well, good morning. It's a real pleasure to be with you. Thank you for inviting us. I'm echoing my colleagues, looking at those 11,228 respondents and all the data that we're able to plumb from that is very helpful in making policy and program decisions within the Air Force. When I got married 25 years ago, it was a year after I joined the service, and I'd been dating my wife before I entered the service, so I looked at her during our wedding, and I'm a bit of a historian when it comes to military matters, and so I said, as General Patton was getting his troops fired up to move from Normandy and make the push into Berlin, he was firing them up. He looked at them and he said, "Accept the challenges so that you may feel the exhilaration of victory." Turns out that was not a great way to start my vows. But I figured if I could get her hooked in early, because you recruit the family, we were going to be okay. I tell that story, it's not true, it didn't actually happen that way. But I tell that story because really the family gives the member a pulse. And I don't mean just in terms of that's where our heart is. I mean, my spouse over the years has given me a great deal of insight with respect to the different command positions I held. Here's the things that you're not hearing. Your staff comes in and gives you certain things, but as I'm out with spouses, as I'm out with the community, here are the challenges that are kitchen table challenges that maybe you're not hearing in the conference room. So that was a way for me to gain information, and the Air Force got really serious about this about 10 years ago with our Key Spouse program. And then when our current Chief of Staff, General Goldfein, came in, he and his wife made it a top priority to basically fix our units. He wanted to revitalize the squadron, and the squadron is the key warfighting unit within the Air Force. That's where the commanders have the greatest ability to impact not just their airmen, but the families that support those airmen. And so we actually memorialized in process policy programming, including using appropriated dollars to support the Key Spouse program. So one of the things I'm really excited to share with you today is that our Air Force Association meeting in Orlando, which starts tomorrow, it's the first time in Air Force history that Key Spouse is a key part of that entire conference. And Mrs. Goldfein, Don Goldfein, is leading that effort. So we put money into training Key Spouses, and the Key Spouse doesn't always have to be the leader's spouse. It can be anybody within the unit. So we actually train people, we give them resources, we give them support networks, we created online presence for those individuals. And we actually gave them a lot of strength and support to get into what's happening around those kitchen tables and bring those details back to us, whether it's PCS or housing or childcare or school requirements, whatever those things are, so that we're able to pulse directly where people are and pull that information back.
Thank you. Just to follow up a little bit more, we are seeing in this survey that almost half, 49% of people who've served less than 10 years are saying that concerns about the impact of the service on their family could cause them to leave in the next few years, so well before that retirement time. You've talked about a number of terrific reforms. I wonder if there is one or two specific reforms that you're currently working on or have your eye on that either in your own life or that you see reflected in the folks you work with could make a difference here.
In the Army with the Quality of Life Task Force, one of the things that our senior leaders really wanted to do, while we're certainly looking at our long-term people strategy and the Quality of Life implementation plan that will be embedded into that, General McConville, Secretary McCarthy, and with good guidance of Sergeant Major of the Army Grinston said, what can we do right now to get rid of some of the stupid things that just make it harder for families because we just have always done it that way. And I'm really proud of some of the things that the Army has jumped right in to do. One of the things that we took a look at right away was childcare capacity across installations, and like how can we make that better, and capacity being a factor not only of our hiring practices but also just how many children can be in that facility. So we've done some things. We've increased our family child care homes. Across the Army, we have created a program that allows child care workers, when you PCS, that we move you don't have to reapply from scratch when you get to the new locations. We've put into place a $1,000 retention bonus for a family child care home, and done many things like that just right up front. Of the things that are within our authorities to do, that why haven't we been doing this all along? The focus is also on this task force is that we know that some bases or some posts are different than others. So our senior leaders have taken a special under their wing, Fort Irwin, Fort Polk, Fort Wainwright. And so taking a closer look at those. We're in the middle of doing education assessments at Irwin and Polk. And I know that education came up as one of the factors in your survey. And Dr. Wardinsky, our ASA MNRA, who comes back to us not only as a retired military officer, but a school superintendent is what he has been doing. And he has got great interest in improving the education experience for our students, not only in terms of the quality of the education in our DODEA schools, but the quality of education in the schools that surround our installations, and also that experience of the transitioning students. So our focus really has been on what can we do right now, working on PCS moves, something as simple as getting your orders 120 days in advance. We found out that we had control over that, and we're making improvements over that. And something as simple as on the dislocation allowance, paying that DLA before the family PCSs rather than doing that after they arrive at their duty station. So the task force is focused on those things. What can we do right now within our authorities? And then under that people strategy, we'll take the longer term, and the results and the inputs from your surveys and the things that we're learning from all the organizations involved in the space are very helpful for that.
That's wonderful. And I'd just like to foot stomp the, I think, effect that these will have. In this survey, we saw that when folks had orders of less than 2 months, everything about their duty station was more difficult, their integration throughout their entire time. So bringing that back, I think, is enormous. Childcare, even though it didn't stand alone as a top issue on the survey, it was embedded in the challenges of each of them, the spouse employment, the family stability. We really should read that as a top factor because it was part of each of those, and certainly the others you mentioned, but I applaud that work. It's really on the right track.
Thank you. So our Navy family framework kind of has three broad areas. Foster a command where sailors and their families can thrive, better connect and inform our Navy team, and ensure relevant and responsive family and quality of life programs. I'd like to just first talk about better connecting your family team. I'm super proud of this, what the Navy is doing, and I'm not even responsible for it. But we're going digital. And so we are transforming our HR systems into the 21st century. We want you to be able to do everything you used to have to go into a waiting room and sit down, and then we're like 3 chickens and 2 goats. You put your name on a list. 4 hours later, they saw you, said you had the wrong form, then you had to come back. We want to be like a banking. app. You know, you just snap a picture of your marriage license and your record gets updated, you're done. And they didn't even know you're married. So we are transitioning to that. This is the My Navy Family app. Now, apps don't solve problems by themselves, but if you've got a family support issue, and just about everything is covered here, you touch this, it's got examples of spouse resumes that you can just copy if you want to, or you can click on Fleet and Family Support Center, and it'll give you the name of the person you can go call to make an appointment to get help with your resume. So we've really gone online, and this is taken from our sailors, their personnel records, to their assignment now. You can go select your future assignments and bid for those online. We are transitioning everything cloud-based. We have the authority to use PKI certificates off your CAT card are now digital, and you can embed them in your phone. So you can do all that stuff that used to be have to put a card in a computer with, you can do on your phone now. And the Navy, that's the fastest part of the Navy that's changing, by the way, is our modernization. We recognize that in order to retain 20th century sailors and their families, we had to become in the 21st century. And so we're really going forward with that. And so that's a way we better inform our families. And what we found is that when families are informed, they might not like what they're informed about, but they're better off overall. And so this, because at least you know if you know what's going to be bad, at least you know what's going to be bad, and you know what the policy is, and you know what policy to ask to change if you don't particularly like it. But we're really trying to reach out, and one of the things we try to do is make sure that our commanders are reaching out to their sailors and their families to understand where all these opportunities are. But we really are transforming the Navy from the HR and family support end to being able to do it off your phone like the rest of the world does. In the childcare issue, so we've got 44,000 people children we provide childcare to, but we've got a 9,000 person waiting list. So if you're one of the 44,000, you're comfortable. If you're one of the 9,000, you're not. And so to try and get after that, we're trying to do some partnership programs with the community. One is where we have a developer build a childcare center. We staff and man it. 50% of the children are military and 50% are community, and that kind of is what funds the organization. Another partnership we're working on is providing childcare in a school where they provide us the building, we provide the staff, and some of the spots go to faculty of the building, and that's kind of how they pay for that. And the other part is that we just subsidize commercial childcare where that's available. Go figure, our biggest problems with childcare are Washington, D.C., Norfolk, Pearl Harbor, San Diego. We have a lot of high rent areas because we own waterfront real estate. And so those are some of the things we're trying to do to get after the childcare issue. And we also want to be more, we want to listen better. Because what we've found sometimes is we don't really understand what I'll call it the modern family needs and wants as compared to what the historic family did. And so we're trying to reach out through the Navy's version of the Key Spouses, the Ombudsman, through our Ombudsman program to understand more what our families need so that we can be responsive to their needs.
Air Force is doing a lot of the same work that our sister services are doing. And what should be heartening to everybody in the room is that we actually do work together. So we used to have this idea of silos of excellence. You know, the Navy will do it the Navy way, the Army will do it what they call the right way about everything. The Air Force goes our own way and that sort of thing. The truth, we actually do spend a lot of time partnering with one another and learning best practices for if our sister service is having success in an area, it might be successful for a sailor or a soldier. Well, that's probably successful for an airman or a Marine too. And so you should just know that up front. I'll hit on two key areas. Childcare is a big issue for all the services, as my colleague shared this morning. So as of the 20th of February, I'm a couple of days dated, there were 3,579 children that were on our waiting lists to get into our child development centers, our youth centers, or into a family child care home. We did a deep dive going back to September of 18, and we realized that we had a couple of problems. One was that it was taking an average of 190 days to hire a new provider. Well, that's entirely too long. So you can't wait for 6 months after you move to a new assignment in order to get a child enrolled in a care program, particularly impacting the ability for the spouse to go to work. So we over the course of the last 18 months, we've gotten that down to 73 days average. It's not fixed yet, but it's significantly better than it was. We also hit a low of 283 family child care providers. That's as low as it had been for the preceding decade. We're now back up to 333 care providers with another 144 that we're cycling very quickly through credentialing so that we can get after those 3,579 kids that don't have anywhere to go right now. Similarly, in some of our high rent areas, we recognize that there's just a cost point that we can't help. So the Department of Defense was able to get authorization, appropriation, for us to provide subsidies for childcare out in the public space. So about 90% of the beneficiaries of this program, which right now it's 3,417 airman families that are registered for this, 90% of those are getting care somewhere out in the private sector, and we're able to subsidize that care expense. So just put it in perspective, for fiscal 19, that was $26.1 million. So there's a concerted effort, because we recognize this is a readiness issue. If the family is good, then the soldier, sailor, airman, marine is good as well in terms of executing their mission. And the second is really spouse employment. We know that that's a challenge. It was 49% of the survey respondents touched on that. And part of it is just, is there reciprocity in between states? If I'm already licensed to do some sort of work, can I just go to the other state and start doing whatever it was I was doing? If I was a nurse, if I was a teacher, whatever it is, because each state, unsurprising, they have their own laws on how they handle this. So in NDA 18, we got authority to provide up to $500 reimbursement to spouses to recertify, to take tests, the things they needed to do. Actually, in NDA 20, we're up to $1,000, so we're able to do even more for those spouses. It's a relatively new program, but what I can say in fiscal 19, 207 spouses were reimbursed $66,800 by the Air Force to help offset those costs. And November 19, the Department of Defense released its last report on spouse employment. All 50 states are working this, which is good. I know Blue Star Families and other organizations are helping us with that. So now we're up to 43 states that accept licenses of some sort, because reciprocity doesn't mean the same thing in every state. We have 31 other states that are trying to expedite those licensure processes so people can move faster through that, and another 41 states will issue temporary certifications sufficient to allow that member goes out and then takes the in-state license. So we're working on those things very concertedly.
That's great. I know our folks in the audience want to ask questions, so I had a last question. I'm going to say it, but then I'm going to also go to the audience so that I don't short circuit that. We know that community integration is a key solution point for supporting military families, that we're having too much isolation. So I'd like quickly, so that we can go to the audience, just your thoughts on what can the services do better to help with that community level integration? Just your thoughts.
Well, first, and I keep looking over my Army teammates at my table, like some of the things at the other services. I'm going to write that down. There are many good things, many things going on. I think it's being seen and being visible. I mean, that's not a program, but we're out there. When I look at the amount of the Army that is not on a military installation, with our recruiting command and our cadet command and all of these types of programs that are not at a military installation, is that the encouragement to integrate themselves into their community. And while they might not have access to a Child and Youth Services softball team, they certainly have access to the Des Moines softball team, that sort of thing. And so just the encouragement of that. But your program efforts, such as the joint effort on the childcare centers, I think that things such as that is just a wonderful approach to bringing the two communities together in a very natural way.
We need to talk more. So we need to get our Navy installation commanders and our senior commanders in installations out to talk to the community, whether it's engaging in business groups, community groups. I've spoken on the stage with a U.S. Senator, and I've spoken to a kindergarten class. And all of that matters because we need to get out and tell the Navy story about what we do, because it helps to provide context for people when they engage with our families. Additionally, we encourage our families to get out in the community and participate in sports and volunteer opportunities, because there's nothing like sitting next to each other at the little kids' soccer game to really develop that dialogue about what goes on and understand more about military lifestyles. And I guess the third point is intergovernmental support agreements. So the law allows the Navy to partner with a local government to provide services on a base. So down at Patuxent River, we're buying road striping for 5 cents a foot as opposed to $1 a foot. And so there's ways to save money with that, but it also helps to knit the local governments back together with the base.
Yeah, those public-private partnerships are critical in really immersing ourselves into our community and knowing who the leaders are. Typically, your local town mayor or your state senator, they have a connection, but it's integrating even more deeply than that. We've been doing this for a number of years in the Air Force, what we call honorary commanders. And so what we do is we invite business leaders and professionals from off base who have no military affiliation whatsoever. That's one of the key stipulates. So I'm only mildly interested if you have military experience. I really want to be able to partner with somebody who doesn't have that exposure, because it allows us to have those connections that the Admiral was talking about, that then we get invited as installation commanders to go participate with our local communities and share our story. That's the key. That's the key thing. So I go back to 1994 when our Chief of Staff, General Jumper, was really talking about our leaders within the Air Force, where he said, we need analog leadership in a digital Air Force. We get too disconnected because we think about things with respect to, I noticed I'm the only one that didn't have a Twitter account, because I'm driving to this point about being analog. We need to get eyeball to eyeball, voice to voice, face to face with the men and women in the community. There's no way for us to get around doing that. We can have a social media presence, and we all do. We all have Facebook pages that tell you what the commander doing, and it's public facing, and our public affairs officers help us stay out of trouble with what we do or don't put on there. But that's a digital space, and we know that people are more disconnected now in an increasingly ever connected world. But it's a digital connection. So it's really about being analog and getting out and encouraging our men and women at all levels within our command structure to do the same thing. Tell your story out in the community. And really, generally, people aren't surprised at how accommodating and comforting and welcoming communities are once they know that we're there. And don't be afraid to stop by the grocery store on your way home in your utility uniform. That's okay. It might generate a conversation. I know the Marine Corps can't do that, but the other services do that. Fair enough, but it's all about analog relationships.
From the audience.
Whoops. Hi, I have a quick question. Sorry. Hi, Patty Barron from the Association of United States Army. Sorry about the echo. It's very, very heartening to hear all of the wonderful initiatives that are being done on behalf of military families, and each of the services is doing a fantastic job. I'm very partial to the Army, of course. So this is a very self-serving question, but I'm going to ask it, ma'am, General Smith. The Air Force just announced that they're bringing their key spouses to the AFA meeting, and I was wondering if there's any way that the Army could think about bringing the FRG leaders to AUSA.
I am certain there's someone here today that can go and ask the right questions, and I'm happy to speak with you about that afterwards and do what is necessary to make that happen.
My name's Sarah, and I run an organization called the Secure Families Initiative, which is one of the many advocacy organizations that benefits from the data that Blue Star Families creates in our work, trying to push the needle. What I wanted to ask was how those of us on the outside can raise advocacy voices in a way that's most helpful to you in the inside, in ways that can complement the efforts that you're already undertaking.
That's a great question, and thank you. Every installation has a public affairs office, and often that's the front door. That's the way to gain access to the installation. And so if you're part of an advocacy group and you have opportunities where you can help us bridge that military-civilian divide, my encouragement to you would be to reach out to the public affairs officers, because they'll know who the right people are to connect you and build those relationships. One caution, and it is a challenge for all the services, is that generally speaking, the military leadership rotates every couple of years. And so if you have a leader that comes in and is very engaged in the community, it's really important that that community continues to reach back to the installation, because those leaders will change out, and maybe they only have 2 months by the time they get their orders to be to their new assignment. That happened to me last summer coming back to DC. I had 60 days. So as you're doing that transition, we're asking the civilians to remain connected to the installations, and don't be afraid to press on that and try to find a way to get into the community.
So thank you all for your time for coming in today. A little nervous, but so I'll continue with a little bit of self-serving question asking. So we're hearing a lot about military spouse employment and all the work that's being done there. So Admiral, as you have more
spouses like myself, civilian career, married to a service member, what work will be done in the detailing process to accommodate those dual career families, much like is being done with military and military careers?
So actually, the Chief of Naval Personnel is here, and that would be his question to answer. But,
Let's chat.
Sir.
So my wife, they can hear me.
Thank you. I know there are more questions. We have to move on, but if you have a question for these folks, if it's okay with you, I'd like to invite you to write them down. We'll get those answers back to you, and we'll share them on our social media afterwards so people get a chance to ask that questions. Is that okay with you guys? Okay. Thank you so much for joining us.
I want to thank our second panel for their incredible insight into incorporating military families into defense policy. And I'd now like to introduce Mrs. Don Schultz. Mrs. Schultz is the spouse of Admiral Carl Schultz, Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard. Mrs. Schultz has been a military spouse for 29 years. She has 5 children and has worked in nursing for over 25 years, having both a PhD in nursing and an MBA MSN in healthcare administration. As a healthcare provider and mom, Mrs. Schultz is most passionate about military healthcare, military child education, and license portability. Of course, we are so grateful to have her here with us today to introduce our next panel. So please help me welcome Mrs. Schultz to the stage.
Good morning, everyone, and I'd like to thank you for being here today to learn more about these very important topics. Thank you also to Blue Star Families for all you do in support of our families and members. My name's Don Schultz, and as Brianna mentioned, I'm a military spouse for 29 years, a mom of 5, and I've worked in the nursing profession for over 25 years. Military health care and access to quality care for our members and their families is so important to me. As our nation continues a broader discussion about health care, we too must address this concern within our military community. As our military continues to evolve, military leaders at all levels are engaged in conversations to continually improve access to care, both here at home and abroad, for our family members and service members. Here to further discuss quality health care for military families, it's my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Thomas Mccaffrey, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs, Lieutenant General Retired Patricia Herrero, CEO of OptumServe, and our panel moderator, Amy Goyer, family and caregiving expert for AARP. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello. It's a tough act to follow. That was an incredible panel, wasn't it? I'm excited to be here, especially both for personal reasons and professional reasons, in that my grandfather, born in 1894, served in World War I and World War II. He was in the Army Air Corps, the Air Force, retired from the Air Force. And I cared for him in the late 1980s and early 1990s. He and my grandmother who had Alzheimer's. He lived to be 98, despite all that military food. And my father served in the Army in World War II. He was in the 10th Mountain Division. And according to my grandmother, he ended World War II in Italy and then in all of Europe. And then I cared for my father also, who developed Alzheimer's disease. So he just passed away a year and a half ago, and I cared for him at home in the Phoenix area. And it was absolutely critical, the support that we got from the veterans' healthcare system. The primary home-based care made a huge difference, all of the supports that we got. So on a personal level, this is a passion of mine. And also, professionally, I serve as AARP's family and caregiving expert, and AARP has a long history and a long legacy of being very committed to veterans and military families. We know about 8 million AARP members are veterans. I hope that some of you are in the room today supporting AARP. And we also know that there are about 5.5 million veteran and military family caregivers across the U.S. who are providing care, unpaid care, at a value of about $14 billion. So it's a very significant support and part of our healthcare system. And we know that they need supports as well. AARP is a free military caregiving guide that we have worked on, and we have other resources around work and jobs for military families. And you can find that at aarp.org/veterans. So lots of great resources there. And so we're very happy to talk today about healthcare. access to timely and quality health care for the systems. And we know that both the military health system and OptumServe are working on reforms and improving services for families. So that's what we want to discuss with both of you today. So Mr. Mccaffrey, if I'd like to start with you. The military health system is going through a lot of reforms, and some major reforms. And we'd really like to hear about that. What are the successes? What are the areas that are needing the most improvement? And what are you finding in terms of results?
Well, thanks for the question. And before I respond, I just a call out to Kathy and the whole Blue Stars Families organization. I think was, as mentioned earlier, how critical an organization like this is in terms of connecting the military families with our fellow citizens. And I say that as a newcomer, and why I think it's important. So I came on board to the military health system about 2.5 years ago. With the exception of my father serving in the Pacific in World War II, I had no connection to the military, no connection to the military health system. I didn't grow up with any exposure to military families. My adulthood, the same thing. And it's not until you have that kind of a connection or exposure that you can even understand some of the issues and be able to engage in some of the advocacy and solution building that you're identifying. It struck me, I've had many memorable moments since coming on board, but one of them, I think I was 6 months into the job. I had been working with a two-star general pretty frequently for that 6-month period. And I forget how this came up, but he and I were one-on-one, and he, I think, was going out the door, and I mentioned something as to, well, where was he going? And he said, well, my middle school daughter is the star in the school play, and I'm really hoping to be able to get to it tonight and see her. And it was like, 3 o'clock, and I'm thinking, well, what's the challenge? I'm sure she's here in school, and so I asked him that. I said, well, what do you mean? And here's this 2-star, and his eyes kind of started welling up, and he said, sir, my family's in San Antonio, and they've been there for 2 years, and I often don't get to do these things. And again, you all experience that, that, but 90% plus of your fellow citizens have no context, no experience in that. And so this organization is really key to making that happen, because you can't expect folks to engage and partner with you if they have no idea and no experience. So enough said on that. I've already had a good morning because I'm not in the Pentagon. I wish that I could stay the rest of the day, but unfortunately I can't. But you made reference to, and I think you had a good understatement, there is a lot of change going on in the military health system. And I'm not going to try to articulate all those changes, but the one that I would consider the fundamental change that's going to affect not only the military as an organization, but our families, is we are in the midst of changing the way DoD manages and administers and operates all of our military hospitals and clinics. You all know that historically each of the services, and then here in the National Capital Region, the Defense Health Agency, in essence have run 4 separate health systems. And what we're doing as part of this reform is, and again, we're in the middle of this, is we're going to consolidate management of all of those hospitals and clinics under the Defense Health Agency. But the goal being, we're going to treat the health system as not 4 separate systems, but one enterprise. And I think one of our successes is we made the decision to do this in a deliberate way. We are doing this over a multi-year period of time. We are working with the service medical organizations to still be supporting the Defense Health Agency as we transition and take on this new responsibility. But more importantly, where I think this change can have concrete benefits to military families are a couple of examples here. And that is, when I've been out at installations at our facilities and talk with families and talk with enlisted, everybody, one of the frustrations is, well, you know, I get stationed, I get assigned at Womack, and I'm down there at Fort Bragg, and I learn how Womack does things in terms of the pharmacy, in terms of labs and appointments. But then I get stationed at Madigan, and it's totally different. And so one of the benefits of consolidating management of our facilities is so that we can have a common standardized experience at how you fill a prescription, how you get lab tests, most importantly, how you make appointments and get referrals to specialists, whether you're doing that at Nellis, Madigan, Portsmouth, or anywhere. And so I believe that is a real concrete benefit of going in this direction. I also, this consolidated management also is a facilitator for our deployment of a common electronic health record. Again, where I think there's great benefits having one integrated medical and dental record from the point of injury to care that you get in the private sector to care you get in one of our DoD facilities is a great benefit in terms of you don't need to be schlepping your records for all the different assignments you go to. It is one record when this is fully deployed. It's not fully deployed yet. And most importantly, it's going to be the same record that the VA will be using. And so there should be a seamless transition between our system and the VA. But again, those are, I think, a couple of examples where this reform, while we're in the midst of it, can be disruptive. I think at the end state, there are real concrete benefits for just how our military families interact and how they are customers of our health system.
So you say it's not fully deployed yet. Any estimation of when it might be?
Yes, so we've deployed about 8 or 9 facilities thus far. We started in the Pacific Northwest, and then this last September, we deployed to 4 additional facilities in California and Idaho, and then we're going to be now ramping up far more rapidly. So in June, we'll have about another 4 or 5 facilities in Nevada and California, and then August as well. The full deployment is, I believe, scheduled to be completed in 2023. The VA is on a longer schedule. They're probably going to be about 10 years out in terms of full deployment.
Sounds kind of typical, but a huge challenge. Sorry.
I didn't say that.
But a huge challenge, but a big step forward. I think making it easier for the service member and the veteran to be able to transition and do those things, it's a huge effect on the quality of care as well. Now, General Horoho, I would like to talk with you a bit about the Exceptional Military Family Program. This is a program that supports families with children, with any family member of any age with special medical or educational needs. We know that in the survey we found about 40% said that they weren't getting timely referrals when they were relocated, and about 9% completely bypassed the system or went outside the system or went without care because of this. And we know what kind of disruption that can cause to families. I believe about 1 in 5 service members has a child with special needs. So this is a significant problem. What can be done to make this more efficient, get them more timely assistance and referrals and specialists that they need?
Thank you. And if I could just start with a thank you first to Kathy and the Blue Star family, because I think the work that you do and you've been doing of providing information allows, one, voices to be heard. And when voices are heard, I think we get, they feel included and we get the best decisions that are being made. Secondly, it allows relationships to be built. And when relationships are strong, then we're stronger together. And so I just want to say thank you. So when we look at the EFMP program and some of the information that came out of the survey, I'd like to answer it from 3 different lenses. So the first lens that I'm going to look through is the lens of a nurse, which is my background, and lens of a nurse of understanding the importance of care coordination, of understanding the importance of patient advocacy, and helping families to kind of navigate through a system. The second lens that I'm going to answer through is the lens of a former Army Surgeon General, of understanding how important it is for our families to receive care and for the service member, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard, to understand the impact that that has on readiness if there's care concerns within the family. And then the third lens that I'm going to answer it through is actually as a CEO, of understanding the importance of communities, of care coordination, of seamlessness, of the importance of providers within military health care, providers within our commercial system, and connecting all of that together and sharing kind of information. And so when we looked at it, both from the information that was gained from the survey and then information that Optum also gained, which was very similar with talking to military families, it kind of came in three different buckets. The first one being administrative, the second one being resources, and the third one being military culture. And so when we look at administrative, stories to me are things that really simplify information. So the story that we heard from several people were that when they were enrolled in TRICARE and they were moving from one region to another, they had to re-enroll. And when they had to re-enroll, then you're starting a whole new care relationship and care experience. And during that time, there's a potential for a gap in care. And so one of the things that I think with all of this is we have the opportunity to start the conversation, flip the lens in how we look at things, and say it's one person, one family, that isn't different when they're in one region to another, right? So how can we look at those processes differently so that it's really seamless when they move from one region to another? So there's many, many different administrative policies that I think we have the opportunity to look at, and to look at it through the lens of military health care and the commercial system and the VA working together really as a seamless integrated capability that supports our nation's heroes and their family members that support them. And the other example that I'd use under administrative is OptumServe has the honor of standing up community care across 36 states, Virgin Islands, District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico to care for our nation's veterans in coordination and collaboration with the VA. And one of the things that TriWest, which is the current third-party administrator, OptumServe, and then the VA, the conversation that we had is let's not do this how it's normally done, which is one day someone stands down and the next day it's a new health insurer, right? And a new care continuum to care for those service members. But what if we change the lens and we put the veteran in the center? How would we do that differently? And how we decided to do that is to do it in a phased plan that allowed us to have a 30-day overlap with the current TRICARE provider. We stood up in one area, and then they stood down, but there was a safety net. And then once we were up and running, then they stand down, and then we moved to another phase. It completely changed the way that we looked at it. When we look at resources, I would say one of the stories that really stuck out for me was a family that was in Europe that was getting cognitive behavioral health care for their child, and they enrolled then in another area where they went to that had that type of care, but when they got there, they found out that every single one of the specialists in that area actually was overbooked, and it would be months before they could get care. So even when the care is there, we still have a national shortage in some specialties. So how do we look at that differently? How do we create ecosystems of care? And then the last one would be the military culture. And the story that really stuck out for me on that one was actually a family that had a son when he was much younger, had special needs, and was in the EFMP program. Well, he got better and didn't require that care anymore. But when they went to get assigned to Korea, they still had that designation, and so they were not allowed to move with their family. And they felt like it was so important for family integrity that they actually paid out of their pocket to move the entire family to Korea. And so there are many things that I think together we can be better when we're serving those that serve this nation.
Really important to follow the family and the changes in the family and make those transitions happen more smoothly. Thank you. So I want to move on to another topic that's of utmost importance and really a major national concern, and that's suicide. And this is also a very personal issue for me. I have a very close friend who almost 20 years ago we lost to suicide. Her husband was, I think, in his third or fourth deployment, and she also had 2 young children who had autism. So she was right in the things we're talking about and did not have the support. And I know part of the thing was the stigma. She didn't want to reach out for help. And part of it was that feeling that you have to be, I'm a military spouse, I'm tough, I'm not going to complain about anything, I'm not going to, and her husband was off, she didn't want to worry him. What's being done around this? And, messaging is a big part of it, and letting people know that you're safe if you seek professional help around suicide or mental health issues. What messaging is working, and what else can be done to release this fear that about half of the service members and their families are feeling like they can't address this?
Yeah, that was probably the most disturbing finding from the survey, at least from my perspective, that you had, 48% of respondents still saying they have a concern in terms of seeking mental health care, whether it's tied to suicidal ideation, but in general, in terms of behavioral health care, how does that affect their career? And I think a couple of things. We do have resources like the Real Warrior campaign that does get messages out and can tie people to not only online resources that they can review on their own time, but actually connect with live people in terms of counselors. We need to do more of that. But I think, frankly, the best messaging is how we as an organization. Is how we walk the talk. What I have heard, I don't have hard data, I have anecdotal information from each of the military departments that the more that they have embedded behavioral health providers into operational units, that is helping break down the stigma, because the service members are seeing a behavioral health provider as part of his or her team. And having that close proximity is another way to message that, hey, he or she is here for that particular need, that particular service. So I think it's doing more of that, number one. Number two, it is also, and again, this is more anecdotal, but the more I interact with senior leaders of all of the military departments, it is becoming more of a priority for senior leaders to convey that kind of personally, that this is seeking mental health services is no different than if you had cancer or you had a health condition. You need to seek out services. You need to consult with professionals to talk about it. So I think those are 2 key things. And then where I would say that the military is kind of far ahead of the civilian sector, and that is in research. We have devoted a significant amount of resources over the last 10 years about why do people take these actions, what triggers things, and part of that research will, I think, help us identify, well, what are the messages, what are the interventions that work. But one of the things that we're trying to do, I think, like everyone's trying to do, is there a way that we can tap all of the different data sources we have, not just healthcare data, but other stressors in life, be it economic, housing, if I have a special needs child in my family, what are the things that if we somehow can identify and predict who is most at risk for suicidal ideation, for taking action so that we can intervene more quickly. But we haven't come up with that. With that solution, but trust me, that is something that we are investing many dollars and much time. And it's not just us working with the VA and others on how can we do better to identify folks earlier in the continuum so that we can actually connect them to the help that they need.
Very hard to add on to that because I think your answer was absolutely beautiful. And so I think the only thing that I would add to it is, we found through research that one of the most important things is relationship, right? And it's that human connection. And at those times when relationships fail, or a soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine may feel like they don't have that shared unity from a deployment, and now they're in another unit and they don't have the same shared experience, that's another area where relationships become vulnerable. So if we could look at all the streams of data that you talked about that's out there, and how do we use predictive analytics and artificial intelligence, and how do we connect in both the personal way as well as through technology that keeps people feeling they're part of a major support system, I think is going to be one of the areas. But it's really something that it's going to take an ecosystem of care to be able to make sure that we're combating this.
It's something we need to be talking about and as you say, make it more acceptable, but actually taking action on as well. We have time for just a quick question here.
Good morning. My name is Steve Schwab. I'm the CEO of the Dole Foundation. Really interesting discussion. And I wanted to let you all know about a program that we launched called the Campaign for Inclusive Care. Secretary Mccaffrey, we came in and briefed you on this, and Patty, we're working close with Optum on it as well. But a lot of military and veteran families feel discluded from and not integrated into their veteran or active service military members' care team. So we're working with the Department of Veterans Affairs. It's funded by USAA. It's a result of some great work we've done with Philips to integrate family members into their medical teams. Could you talk a little bit about, Secretary Mccaffrey, about the value of doing so, including families directly with practitioners, integrating caregivers into the care continuum, making sure that there's good communication and activity and engagement between the care provider and the family member and the caregiver?
You can just do a quick, because we're out of time. That's such an important question.
Yeah, I mean, let me foot stop. That's critical, and it's no different than in the civilian sector. I think anyone who's had to assist a parent, a grandparent in navigating through the health system, in essence, you need an advocate, a case manager, and so totally critical in terms of how do we as a system, work with your organization, Blue Star Families, to be maybe a resource to make that connection between the family and then the healthcare system, be it the military healthcare system or one of our private sector partners, to bridge that gap, because that resource, frankly, is not there, whether it's our system or the civilian system.
I'm so sorry. It goes so fast, doesn't it? There's so many good, important topics. But will you be here for a little bit if people have questions? Again, if you have other questions, write them down, get them to the Blue Star Family staff, and they will get those answered in their social media. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
One thing is abundantly clear so far, and that is that the civilian community plays an extremely important role in the lives of our military service members and their families, both through the transition experience and while serving. Military families face frequent moves and deployments. We've spoken about that, and it's so important to feel a sense of belonging to their community to combat loneliness. One area that the Military Family Lifestyle Survey examined was what's called cultural competence. Military and veteran family respondents who perceived that civilians in their local communities had greater military family lifestyle cultural competence felt a greater sense of belonging to that community. So here to discuss now cultural competency and the ways in which a civilian community can embrace the military community, our panel participants, Brian Tucker, he's the Vice President of Corporate Partnerships for CSX, and we have Mark Santiago, Divisional Vice President for Macy's. And this panel will be moderated by Jenny Korn, Deputy Assistant to the President, Principal Deputy Director, Office of Public Liaison. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Thank you so much, Brianna. It's so much fun to be introduced by a military spouse also, for one military spouse to another, and especially in a demanding job that you have as well. Thank you so much, Kathy and Blue Star Families, for having me come, and even though it's just across the street, it's always hard for me to get out of that building. So that's a really long title there. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. Deputy Assistant to the President in our White House Office of Public Liaison. I think we have one of the greatest jobs in the White House. We get to talk directly to Americans across the country. So whether it's military families, Gold Star families, caregivers, veterans, business leaders, minority leaders, you name, we cover America, basically, for every issue that this president and the administration is concentrating on. And the best part of my job is to have real meetings with people from across the country in the White House, and from those meetings, ideas getting put into place. One of the things I'm most proud of is the executive order signed by the president on military spouse employment, working hand in hand with Kathy, and also I think Liz O'Brien is here today as well, hiring our heroes, in making sure that it's a priority for us to have military spouse employment. And I can touch on a bunch of other things, but I know we're supposed to keep our introductions brief, but my best title is military spouse. My husband served 21 years in the Marine Corps, and so we were on both coasts many times, Camp Pendleton, Lejeune, Quantico, you name it. And so what we're talking about today really hits home about how my community supported us. And at times there was great community support, and at other times there was no support. And I could definitely feel it, especially when my husband was on deployment. So that is a really big issue for me. When I was in Camp Pendleton, I don't know why or how, but I knew that the community supported me. I knew that certain businesses would give us discounts, or there was parades, or there was all kinds of things. I don't know how in the background it happened, but I knew when my husband was on deployment, I had a support system. We were at Quantico, and we opted to live off of the base, and my husband was in Iraq, and my grandmother passed away. My uncle died by suicide, and a tree fell into our house all in the same month, and a mudslide came into my house while my husband was deployed. So, and I didn't have a lot of community support, so that to me is really, really important. So that's just a little bit about me, but why don't the two of you introduce yourselves, and then I'll go into the questions.
Sure, Mike. Is this on? Let me see. Here we go. All right. My name is Brian Tucker. I'm Vice President of Corporate Communications for CSX. And I guess I'd just begin by, I know everyone has, but it's because it's so deserved, thanking Kathy and the organization, Blue Star Families, for everything that you do. Much like Jenny, I have experience of being in a military family. I'm a military brat, and while we did not move, we had the luxury of being stationed not too far away at Fort Meade for my dad's entire military career. He was gone about a third of my life when I was a child, and it seemed like whenever something happened, he was on tour. Whether the basement flooded, or the air conditioner would go out, or something happened, and so obviously I have, great admiration for everything that you do, Kathy, and your organization, and we are so proud to be able to be a partner, and we'll get into it a little bit more when we get into the questions, but to see firsthand the work that the organization is doing in the communities is just really inspirational.
Yes, okay, it's working, very good. My name is Mark Santiago, and as mentioned, I'm the Divisional Vice President for Macy's. I've been with Macy's a little over 25 years now, and really looking forward to being able to talk about, our partnership, and likewise, Kathy, and everyone involved with Blue Star Family. I'm a veteran, and I was in the Navy Reserve for approximately 6 years active, 2 years inactive reserve. And I'm very excited about what we have been able to do in partnership with Blue Star Family, just from our organization. And so likewise, I just want to say thank you. I know we're going to get into a lot more with questions, but very excited about being here today and look forward to having a great discussion.
Great. When I saw Mark's name on there, I was like, I'm going to bring my Platinum Macy's card to show him. I'm
There
such
you
a
go.
big customer. I do have one. Let's start with our first question. Both of you obviously have outreach efforts to our military families and building the communities. So can you talk a little bit about how your outreach efforts have helped to build those communities that are supportive of military families? How do you go about doing that? Brian, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Well, this commitment, really, that we have to supporting military families is sort of recent for us. About 2 years ago, we were taking a look at our philanthropic activities, and we had always been recognized as, as a leading corporate citizen through our philanthropic activities. But we wanted to take a step back and really make sure that we were making as much of a difference as we possibly could by focusing in on one key issue. And we didn't know what that was, so we started to do our research. We polled our employees, and one of the pieces of research that really informed our decision was when we came across the Blue Star Families survey. And when we saw the results of the survey and the magnitude of some of the issues that military families are struggling with, it became, and obviously listening to our employees, for whom this issue is very, very important, we made the decision to focus all of our philanthropic activities on supporting military families, service members, veterans, and also first responders and their families. But one of our 5 major partners is Blue Star Families, and the relationship that we have with Blue Star Families is really unique because it allows us to get right out into the communities. We identified, along with Blue Star Families, key communities where we have large pockets of employees and where there are also, kind of a critical mass of military families. And we launched 4 chapters last year. This was our first year with this program. We launched 4 chapters, one in our hometown of Jacksonville, and Baltimore, Nashville, and Chicago. And this year we will soon be, I hope I'm not scooping anybody, but we'll be launching one in Dayton, Ohio, and Tampa as well. And when we launched these chapters, what has really been gratifying for us is the connection that our employees are able to make with the military families. Obviously, in these communities, they're being introduced perhaps to Blue Star Families for the first time, but immediately they're connected with people in the community through our employees and other volunteers that we bring out that can help them feel more welcome in the community and expose civilians to the issues that they're dealing with.
I think that's the most important thing, is that as military families, we just want people who don't know military families just to know who we are and why that's important. And I think civilians who are willing to do that, it's very important, because then they know what you need. Mark, what about yourself?
One of the things that we realize as an organization at Macy's is that when you take a look at all of the people that work within our organization, there are many people who are in the military, a reservist in the military, a veteran like myself. And so this was a very natural thing for us to become a part of. And we're extremely proud of this recent partnership with Blue Star Families. And one of the things that that we're doing most recently, and I believe we're in our third year of doing this, we do what's called a roundup campaign. So anyone walks in during the month of July into one of our stores, you'll be asked, would you like to round up your purchase? So if it's whatever it is, just round up to that next dollar, and all of that gets added up, and we partner in terms of that with Blue Star Families. And I know it goes to great things out there. So that's a partnership that we're really proud of. And we're continuing to do that. And you're going to see that, like I said, in the month of July. If you walk into one of our locations, you're going to see our colleagues in the store. They'll have a ribbon. They'll say, I'm a veteran or a veteran family member. So you're going to see this real present throughout all of our locations, as well as it being marketed during the 4th of July fireworks show that I'm sure everyone will be watching, Macy's 4th of July fireworks show. So that was, that's something, again, that we were just extremely proud of that we do in terms of just connecting with the community, and really they can see it when they walk into our stores. That creates a tremendous sense of pride with colleagues who are either a veteran, so serving as a reservist, but working maybe at Macy's, or someone who has a family member that is in active duty. When I walk into our stores, and pretty much almost every month, but especially when we're highlighting this, when I walk into our stores, it is so awesome to see customers and how they engage with our colleagues in the store, or our colleagues engage with the customer. And the type of conversations that come from that are just very special. And we've got many stories. Maybe we'll get into that in just a little bit. But very, very proud that that is one way that we really work with Blue Star Families to make sure that we are supporting this great cause.
Wonderful. I love those. I just love those benefits, and military families definitely see that when they go into the stores, or they see those efforts, and they're very. You may not hear it as much, but we definitely appreciate that. So, what do you think are the greatest benefits of improving military families' sense of belonging in the communities in which they live? Like, why is that? Why is that important?
Well, I mean, it's important we see the result, the results in the survey. I mean, it's clearly, one of the striking issues that military families are dealing with, it's one of the most impactful. Giving them that sense of belonging is one of the most impactful things that we're able to do through our program. I talked about the launching of the community chapters, and Kathy said that this is a chapter-based organization. So much of the work that happens directly to benefit the military families and the work that goes on is through those chapters in those communities. So I think that everything that we can possibly do to expose civilians to the issue and make them aware, raise the awareness, is that's really important.
You, and then I would love to ask both of you to maybe share a specific story of a military family that you've helped.
Absolutely. So, I think it's extremely important. You had mentioned, wanting belonging. I mean, everyone wants to belong, right? So when you think about this outreach, I can tell just kind of a quick little personal story. I started with Macy's when I was 21 years old. I had just come off active duty. I was still in the reserves, and I, was going to school and just needed a job. So I started out with Macy's as a holiday hire. And I remember, even back then, to over 25 years ago, my manager, and I remember his name, Roland Ramirez, how supportive he was, even 25 years ago, whether I was going on my weekend, every weekend, or if I had to go on an extended trip when I went over to the Middle East, or I had to go to Korea. And I remembered that. I remembered, gosh, these guys are supporting me in whether I'm going to school, they're supporting me in the military, and they're leading me to thrive in this organization. So, we at Macy's want to do the same thing. And I'm so proud to work for the organization that has allowed me to pilot certain things with other colleagues where this is very passionate to them as well too. And so, for example, the military discount that we provide in a certain amount of our locations that have a heavier populated military group or family members. So this organization started that, and they didn't even know it 25 years ago. And it just organically has continued to nurture over the years. And so, that is one way. That's a personal story just in terms of why it is so important. I can get into another story if you'd like. So most recently, so that was my own personal. Most recently, I've been mentoring a sergeant major for the past 10 years or so. He came on board with us and has just done a fantastic job. And so I mentored him from over the phone for probably the first 3 or 4 years. He got deployed. We supported him through that deployment over in Iraq. He came back, and just so happened, when he came back, he got to come into my district at the time, and that was in San Antonio, Texas. And so he's been working with me for the last 4 years or so. We recently promoted him out into Tennessee, and he runs 2 stores for us out in Tennessee. But he recently just had me come on over to his reserve unit, and surprisingly awarded me the Employer Support Guard and Reserve Award. And had no idea. I thought I was meeting him for lunch, right? And I brought my 3 boys, and we were able to, he surprised me in front of everybody. And I got to tell you, it's just coming like full circle. So here I was 25 years ago being supported, as a military reservist. And then 25 years later, here I've been mentoring. And I always tell, his name's Ron, I always tell him, not only did I mentor you, you've been mentoring me. He was, full circle. And you could just see my support to him, his support to me. And there's many other stories like that. But just that sense of belonging and acceptance at all levels through the organization and within the community.
Thanks, Mark. And Brian, do you want to share a personal story? Or not personal, but like a story?
Sure.
Because then we're going to do a lot of stories. We'll just do personal stories for the rest of the time. If you're good with that, I'm good with that. No.
Sure. Look, I think for us, again, we're a year into this program, and already there are so many stories to tell. I failed to mention that CSX has about 21,000 employees across the eastern half of the United States, and 1 in 5 of our employees is either a veteran or a reservist. So this is something that's naturally near and dear to their heart. And the stories that are really gratifying to me, and the ones that kind of validate the decision that we made when we decided to support this cause, after we made the announcement, it was amazing how many people would come forward and say to me, I've actually benefited from organizations, either like Blue Star Families or some of the other organizations that we've supported, and to see the level of engagement that that this program has generated for employees is just really tremendous. I mean, just as an anecdote, when we launched the first chapter in Jacksonville, we launched it at our corporate headquarters, and a number of our senior executives and other staff spent an afternoon building bicycles for a handful of military kids from local base. At the end of the day, there was a reveal. This was to commemorate the launching of the chapter in Jacksonville. And at the end of the day, there was a reveal, and all of the kids came in and were able to pick out their bike and just to see the connection between the kids, the employees, and then more importantly, the parents that accompanied the children there, knowing that, this was of course a symbolic gesture, but that now they will have this resource in Jacksonville that they can turn to help alleviate some of the issues that they're struggling with. That would just really meant the world to the company and made our employees just feel really great. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think the employer-to-employee relationship and having veterans and those who are in the military in there so people could know each other are good. I had a young person ask me, who she's kind of in a mid-level management, she's like, are veterans angry? And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, so-and-so was doing this and this. I go, no, they don't have a lot of patience for nonsense. I'll just say that right now. And living with a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps, so sniper, to me it's normal. So anyway, but I just think that them knowing that, and you have people who are so no nonsense, they're going to get the job done. We only have time for one more question, then we need to do Q&A, otherwise we're going to get into somebody else's time. So what would you recommend to other companies who want to do what you're doing? What specific takeaways would you say for someone who's just another company who's like, I want to help military families, or want to help, what should I do? What's the first step, and what does that look like?
Well, I think speaking from experience, you should do your research, and you should start with the Blue Star Family Survey. But I would just say, I know that there are a lot of companies who are focusing in this space, but there aren't enough. And I would say just do it. Just do it. Join us. It has been so beneficial to the culture of our organization, the amount of pride that people feel when they are able to take part personally, whether you're in Jacksonville at the corporate headquarters, or if you're in Waycross, Georgia, or if you're in Albany. This is happening all across our network, and I can't say, it's just so tremendous, the amount of pride that employees feel in the organization, and knowing that we're supporting our nation's heroes.
Great. I think the first thing I would tell an organization is, I would say, listen, when you think about where you spend most of your time, it's your home and probably your job. Those are the two places you probably spend most of your time when you're in your career, right? So when you think about your home, I would say think about your home and think about what you're wanting to create in that home, a very loving, accepting, together type environment, a supportive environment. Well, likewise, in that second place where you spend the most amount of your time, wouldn't you want to do the same thing? And when you look in the mirror, like I said earlier, you look in the mirror and you take a look at your family members at work, I guarantee you there are a lot of family members that have either served, have someone who are serving, maybe they're reservists themselves too, maybe they just came off active duty, because my story is not unique, Ron's story isn't unique. That's what I would tell them. And likewise, I would say start with Blue Star Families. So jump right on in. And we have, it said, less than 1% serve, but that could be a little bit higher percentage in some of the cities that have a heavier military population. Like I live in San Antonio currently. We call it Military City, USA. So we have a lot of military, service members. So from that standpoint, that's the number one thing I would say. The number two thing I would say is that when you become part of your family at work, that extends to their family outside of work as well too, whether it is their immediate or whether it's their cousins or aunts, uncles, or friends that have become family. You become part of that extended family as well too. I can tell you real quick, in San Antonio, there are a lot of businesses that give the discount. And for me, it's not the discount, it's not the extra 10 or the 15, 20. That's nice, don't get me wrong, that's nice. But it's when you go there and the person that is working there and they say, thank you for your service. Because you served, we're giving you, the whatever the percentage is off. And then you've got your son there and they see you being recognized because you served this country and that sense of pride. I would tell the company, why wouldn't you want to be part of that? So jump in and create that culture within your organization.
Thank you so much. I think that's really an important point, and you're right about it's not about the exact discount. It's about the recognition. And there's one amusement park that will go nameless, but doesn't offer any military discounts. And I will always remember that. It's just a thing. Anyway, I think we are Are we going to take questions? Oh, I can ask one more question. All right. What is the one thing that you'd like us to take away from this conversation, and what everybody here should know about engaging with our communities for our military families?
I guess the one thing, and I said it as a response to the last question, but it's any philanthropic focus is going to be worthwhile because you're going to be supporting and fulfilling a need. I would just say that with this particular issue, it's just the impact that it has had on our organization has been tremendous and it has surpassed our expectations. So if you are looking for a way to address an issue and meet a critical need and at the same time engage your employees, then this is the space you should be in.
I think just, the thing that I would want everyone to leave with is at Macy's, we have a couple sayings, and it says, servant type leadership as well as leading to thrive. Servant leadership and leading to thrive. And I really believe in those two things in the teams that I lead. So what I would say in terms of servant leadership and leading to thrive is that I think most people, want to serve in some capacity, whether it's in the military, whether it's, someone on the PTA, someone it's serving in something in your community. Most people want to serve. And so this would be a great way to make sure that you feel that servant type leadership or that leading to thrive. And the leading to thrive piece, just one little final story, and I know we got to go. We have a store manager that every time her husband got deployed somewhere or had to move, the company wanted to make sure that she was leading to thrive, and they moved her almost every time and got her another executive role every time her husband, who was a captain in the Coast Guard, had moved. That's leading to thrive. That's servant leadership. That's leading to thrive. So.
That's awesome. That's a great story. I would say the one thing for myself, a takeaway, especially for those of you who are in nonprofits and organizations, at the White House, we bring in thousands of military families and veterans and Gold Star families and caregivers through those doors to have meetings, to have briefings, to have events with the president. And we're very proud of trying to bring as many Americans from all over the country into the White House to talk about policies, but also to give recognition. And so if you're not engaging with us and you want to engage with us, please know that you can. Kathy knows how to get a hold of me, but our doors are open for our military families and our veterans to, like I said, work on specific policy issues. We work closely with DOD and VA, or just recognition, bringing in military families to even do a tour. I know I shouldn't say that, but from that to policy, we work on all of it, and we're just open here. And thank you all for your service, and thank you all for who are doing the programs that you are all doing. So thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. All right, we're done. Thank you.
I just want to let you know that not too far off in the future is your lunch, but it's not quite yet. We're going to have an appetizer of some inspiration here, and it is my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Holly Ann Milley, She is the spouse of General Mark Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She's the mother of 2 children. She's been a nurse for 32 years, spending 18 years as a critical care nurse, and the last 14 years specialized in cardiac nursing. Mrs. Milley also serves many nonprofit organizations as a senior advisor, including the Red Cross, USO, and Army Emergency Relief, among others. And while her husband was deployed, Mrs. Milley also served as a liaison at Walter Reed, and I love this part, greeting all wounded 101st Airborne soldiers on arrival. Mrs. Milley has served as a family readiness group leader at all levels of command and always seeks out opportunities to conduct community outreach. So please join me in welcoming Mrs. Holly Ann Milley.
Thank you, Brianna, for that warm introduction, and thank you to all of you for having me here today. I'd like to start and take a moment to thank our military spouses that are here with us, senior spouses, government and military leaders, and a special thanks to Kathy and the Blue Star family team for advocating and caring so deeply for our military families. We appreciate your willingness to participate in today's critical discussion as it demonstrates committed and continued support for our military community. On behalf of myself, Blue Star families, and all of our families listening today, we are so grateful for your dedication to this cause. I'd like to take a moment to thank the American Red Cross for allowing Blue Star families to host this event in such a beautiful and historic building. As a Red Cross volunteer for many, many years, I know firsthand the importance of the Red Cross mission and the incredible community support the organization provides. It's an honor to be here to represent military families. My husband, Mark, and I have been married for more than 35 years. We've moved more than 20 times. He has had 9 operational deployments, and I have held 14 different jobs. Just like some of you, I've had to make many tough decisions, and one of those decisions was to stay behind while my husband transferred to another installation, followed by a year-long deployment, so that our son could finish high school and I could stay in the job that I loved. Just like some of you, I've had to transfer my professional credentials, my nursing license, to 9 different states, costing me time and money with each move. And some of these transfers came before the internet, if you can even remember that far back. It was an especially difficult and lengthy process doing everything by snail mail. And just like all of you, I have fought to ensure that I was doing what was best for my family. I fought not just to maintain my career, but to also maintain my identity outside of being a military spouse. The decisions we made together weren't always easy, but we always had to do what was best for our family. I've been fortunate that Mark has always been the biggest supporter of my desire to maintain my own career, even if that meant difficult sacrifices and additional time apart. I've always been so proud to be a part of Mark's military career, and I'm grateful for the opportunities it has afforded us. However, I am a firm believer in having your own identity, finding ways that make you feel happy and whole. For me, that has been my family, and that has been my career as a nurse. Military life can often make it difficult to find and maintain your own identity, but it is so important for your well-being, and ultimately the well-being of your service member spouse and your family. For those military spouses listening today, I encourage you to stay committed to who you are and what is important to you. You are a priority, you are important, and you are very much appreciated. In my 35 years as a military spouse, I have certainly experienced some of the hardships, but I've also seen such inspiring progress. Blue Star Family's annual Military Family Lifestyle Survey highlights that progress. The survey gives service members and their families an outlet to share their challenges and what matters to them. The survey also provides real data to military and civilian leadership. Having a tool like this, where service members and their families can share honestly, can help leaders learn the ground truth, identify the true concerns of military families, and drive necessary changes. This survey helps to inform civilian neighbors and military families so they better understand ways that we can work together to build a greater sense of belonging in their communities. The survey has brought the issue of spouse employment as an issue, which is an issue close to my heart, to the forefront of conversations about military family well-being and retention. And through the data collected in the survey, we've been able to observe the positive and continued momentum on this issue. More than 11,000 military, veterans, and their family members from every branch of service, including the National Guard and Reserve communities, responded to this year's survey. Their responses provided rich data that clearly show what our military families are concerned about. Military spouse employment was the #1 issue for military spouses, followed by concerns about the amount of time away from family, dependent children's education, and military family stability. Additionally, military families named financial issues, relocation, and isolation from family and friends as their top lifestyle stressors. And 47% of survey respondents felt that their local civilian communities had a limited understanding and appreciation for military and veteran families. As a healthcare professional, mother, and working spouse, these concerns resonate strongly with me, and they are interconnected. Looking back at my 33-year career, I realized that my career enabled me to truly become a part of every community that we've lived in. From my colleagues and my patients, I learned about local food, traditions, and cultures. I was able to share the military story with them. This is why the topic of spouse employment is so important. It is about much more than just military spouse employment. It's about building those relationships within our community so we can understand and support each other. I'm honored to be a part of today's discussion. Our military families want to serve, and they're proud to serve, but there's always more that we can do to support them effectively. Today's event is an incredible step forward, and your participation confirms to the members of the military community how seriously you take their feedback and how important this cause is to you. My sincere hope that at the end of this conversation today, we will all have made a commitment to work together to achieve a lasting, meaningful change in support of our resilient, dynamic, and strong military community. And thank you all again for attending today's events and allowing me to share some of my perspectives as a military spouse and also an advocate for military families. I look forward to being part of this important work that stems from the 2019 military lifestyle results. Thank you very much and enjoy your lunch.
This is the first event that I have ever emceed that is actually on time, and we are hours into this. I'm amazed. This is, wow. Okay, so it is lunchtime. I have about 8 story ideas for different columns and TV segments that I can do, so hopefully everyone is kind of getting all of those ideas in their brains too. So let's have lunch. Lunch is available downstairs. There are boxed lunches there. It is 41 right now. Join us back at 1 p.m. We're going to begin the panel discussion, Operation Feel at Home, Building Communities on Military Installations. And 1 p.m. we shut the door. You're not going to be able to get back in. Just kidding, but let's go for this goal of staying on time, right? All right, see you in a few.